I know, I'm on my way to a house. This guy, Sam, is going to be closing on it today. The commission's going to be huge. I really can't miss out on this. All right, love you too. Bye. It's Cherie, your realtor? I see you let yourself in. I'm Cherie and Samantha.
Hi, Mommy dears.
What are you doing here? This is a house that I'm trying to sell.
Now you really sound like my mother.
This is so funny. This is my work. You're going to get me fired. They're videotaping every second of this. Look, at home, it's different. It's not different.
This third scene functions as a pressure chamber in which all the unresolved tensions between Samantha and Cherie collapse into a single claustrophobic moment, transforming what initially appears to be a narrative of leverage and reversal into a deeper meditation on agency, recognition, and the emotional cost of living under constant surveillance, both literal and symbolic. The scene opens with a reminder of a promise, a vague future debt that Samantha once offered Cherie in order to reclaim her own safety. And the lack of specificity surrounding this favor is crucial, because it mirrors how women are often taught to negotiate discomfort indirectly, leaving emotional accounts open-ended in the hope that clarity will arrive later. Cherie's decision to invoke this promise on a day framed as professional obligation immediately establishes the collision of roles that defines her character. She is a wife, a mother, a real estate professional, and a woman with long-suppressed desire. And the film is careful to show how these identities do not coexist peacefully, but instead compete for dominance in moments of crisis. By telling her husband she will be late because of a high-value client, Cherie reaches for the language of legitimacy and success, using work as both shield and alibi, a maneuver familiar to many women who rely on professionalism to mask emotional vulnerability. The house she enters is empty of people but heavy with implication. A pristine environment designed for display rather than habitation, and this emptiness underscores the loneliness that has shaped Cherie's interior life. Her assumption that the figure on the patio is a male client named Sam reflects the persistence of heteronormative expectation, even in her own mind, and the shock she experiences upon discovering Samantha instead is rendered not as scandal but as existential rupture. In that moment, Cherie is forced to confront the consequences of her earlier entitlement, recognizing that the favor she believed she was owed has returned not as opportunity but as reckoning. Samantha's presence, vulnerable yet deliberate, shifts the power dynamic in a way that is emotionally complex rather than triumphant, suggesting that her choice to be there is less about control than about reclaiming narrative authority. Cherie's immediate reaction is panic framed as responsibility, her concern focused on reputational damage, professional fallout, and the ever-present gaze of surveillance cameras. And this response reveals how deeply she has internalized a system that values appearances over emotional truth. Her urgency in urging Samantha to leave is not motivated by care but by fear. And the film critiques this instinct by showing how often women in positions of authority default to self-protection when accountability looms. The mention of constant recording is symbolically rich, representing not only literal surveillance, but the social scrutiny that polices women's relationships, particularly when those relationships deviate from sanctioned norms. For Samantha, the knowledge that she is being watched does not produce shame but clarity, and her refusal to leave without acknowledgement becomes an assertion of selfhood in a world that has repeatedly asked her to minimize herself for others' comfort. This refusal is not framed as revenge, but as a demand for recognition, a moment in which Samantha insists that her experience, confusion, and hurt be taken seriously rather than erased for convenience. From a queer perspective, this insistence resonates deeply, reflecting the ways lesbian and queer women often find themselves negotiating visibility on terms not of their choosing, forced to decide when silence is protective and when it becomes complicit. The scene's emotional core lies in the contrast between Cherie's frantic attempts to manage optics and Samantha's quiet determination to be seen, a contrast that exposes how power operates not only through authority but through narrative control. Cherie's confidence that she can handle the cameras suggests a lifelong reliance on systems that forgive her transgressions while disciplining others, and the film uses this moment to interrogate how privilege within age, class, and professional status can distort one's understanding of consent and consequence. Samantha's awareness of Cherie's capabilities does not reassure her. Instead, it sharpens her resolve, because she understands that being managed out of sight would replicate the same erasure she has experienced throughout the relationship. The question of what Samantha wants is intentionally left ambiguous in concrete terms, but emotionally it is clear that she seeks acknowledgement of harm, of imbalance, and of the emotional labor she has been forced to carry alone. This ambiguity allows the scene to avoid sensationalism, focusing instead on the psychological stakes of confrontation and the courage required to resist being smoothed over. For lesbian viewers, this dynamic mirrors real-life experiences in which attraction or attention from an older or more powerful woman can feel validating at first, only to reveal underlying asymmetries that demand ethical reckoning. The film does not suggest that desire itself is the problem, but rather that desire untethered from accountability becomes corrosive, particularly when it exploits vulnerability. Women more broadly may recognize themselves in Samantha's exhaustion, her sense that she has been accommodating for too long, and her realization that safety purchased through silence is ultimately fragile. The domestic and professional spaces collapse into one another here, illustrating how women's lives are rarely compartmentalized cleanly, and how expectations of composure follow them into every room. Society's discomfort with women's intimacy is reflected in the omnipresent cameras, a metaphor for cultural voyeurism that alternates between erasure and sensational exposure, offering no middle ground for honest complexity. By foregrounding this discomfort, the film critiques a culture that demands transparency from women while denying them interpretive authority over their own stories. Cherie's assurance that everything is under control rings hollow, because control is precisely what is being challenged, and the scene asks viewers to consider who benefits when women's conflicts are resolved quietly rather than truthfully. Symbolically, Cherie represents an older generation of women who learn to survive by mastering systems that were never designed for their fulfillment, while Samantha embodies a younger refusal to accept survival as the endpoint. Their interaction mirrors tensions within queer communities between caution and candor, between preserving hard-won stability and demanding emotional honesty. The film treats this tension with seriousness, refusing to cast either woman as purely villain or victim, and instead situating them within structures that reward denial and punish vulnerability. In doing so, it highlights how queer women are often required to justify their feelings not only to others but to themselves, translating emotional truth into acceptable language or suppressing it entirely to remain safe. Samantha's choice to confront rather than flee is thus framed as an act of self-recognition, a decision to stop outsourcing her sense of reality to someone else's comfort. The absence of resolution at the scene's end reinforces the film's commitment to realism, acknowledging that moments of clarity do not automatically produce closure, and that accountability is a process rather than an event. By ending on the assertion that Cherie has everything under control, the film invites skepticism, encouraging viewers to question narratives of control that rely on invisibility and erasure. As a cultural text, the scene contributes to conversations about visibility by insisting that being seen without being understood is not enough, and that ethical intimacy requires more than access or secrecy. It affirms that women's relationships, particularly those marked by imbalance, deserve scrutiny not because they are deviant, but because they are consequential. The restrained tone, the emphasis on interior states, and the refusal to provide spectacle all work together to challenge dominant representations of women's desire, offering instead a portrait of connection fraught with responsibility. For audiences seeking authenticity, this scene offers recognition in its portrayal of discomfort as meaningful, of boundaries as necessary, and of self-respect as something that must sometimes be claimed in opposition to harmony. It underscores that women are often taught to be grateful for attention, even when it costs them safety, and that unlearning this lesson is both painful and liberating. In centering Samantha's refusal to disappear, the film asserts that visibility begins not with being chosen by another, but with choosing oneself, even when the consequences are uncertain. The quiet intensity of the scene lingers precisely because it resists easy answers, honoring the complexity of women's emotional lives and the resilience required to navigate them. Ultimately, this moment is not about leverage or payoff, but about truth, about the courage to disrupt a narrative that benefits from silence, and about the ongoing work of becoming visible in a world that still struggles to witness women's love, anger, and self-recognition without distortion or fear, and it leaves the viewer with the understanding that care, accountability, and honesty are inseparable, and that any relationship worthy of the name must be able to withstand being seen.